grant manager. This is Office of Juvenile Justice review from our national. Check that out. Omaha Binding, part of our coalition group that been working on a number of diversity here at First United Methodist Church. For folks, if this is your first time, welcome. We've been doing this for a few years, and one of our goals is to have activities and issues that explore the issue of race, diversity, and many of the issues that are contemporary in our society. So tonight we're going to do something a little different. We're going to watch a video, a film that was made in Omaha, out of Omaha. One of the producers, Wayne Brown, is here, and he's going to talk a little bit afterwards. I don't have much to say today, but I will make a couple of announcements before we get started. Preston has something called Nebraska Counts, and they're having an event, I know, where you have to go online to take some information about the census. Preston will be the person to contact, and he has some flyers on the table related to that, but February the 28th, Friday, at 11:30, every fourth Friday of the month, they're doing this event. So look at that information on the table. The second thing I want to mention is every event that we do here related to our series of events related to race and diversity and racism and so on, we ask people to fill out an evaluation form so we keep track of that. But we also ask you to give us suggestions for future activities that we might participate in. Normally in an event, we have table discussions. Tonight, we're not going to be able to chance to do that because we're going to stay close to the time. But Wayne will talk a little bit afterwards and respond to questions or feedback related to the video. And the other thing that we have another event called A Tale of Two Cities, segregated Omaha. And it's going to be Tuesday, March the 10th from 6:30 to 8:30. And that's going to be at UNO in the CPAC building, and there's free parking. We're going to have a panel discussion with the director of Black Studies will be there, and I think we're going to have a couple other folks there to talk about what is it like living in Omaha in terms of the Tale of Two Cities. So we encourage you to come to that event, which hopefully from watching this video or this film might give you an opportunity to raise some other questions or issues. One of the things that we're really astutely aware of is that oftentimes people don't have a safe place to have these conversations in this community. So one of the things at First United Methodist Church we're committed to is having people where they can dialogue on these important topics of the day. So because we're chasing time, we're going to cut right to the video or the film, and then we're going to have Wayne come up right afterwards and kind of respond to some of the questions. But this was made about a year or so ago. It's been in production for at least almost 10 years or so. Got a lot of national recognition, but not as much local as we'd like. But we're kind of excited about it to be able to show local people, talk about some of the struggles they face. And a couple of the individuals in the video I personally know, so I was really moved by it.
When I was in high school and had the courage to
Nebraska Counts. Karen reminded me I should also mention Policy, Research, and Innovation is part of the group that helps also co-sponsor many of these events out of the First United Methodist Church. And as we said earlier, we're looking for other events that we can kind of co-sponsor, work with other organizations that address or talk more about issues related to race and so on. The other announcement was to make is we can get a few volunteers afterwards to help us put the chairs and tables back, so we want to throw that out. If some folks can kind of stay around with the letter and help us do that. And at this point, Wayne, we're going to have you come up front. We're going to do something a little different, as I said, folks. We're going to have Wayne kind of respond to questions, comments, and so on. I'm going to try to play the role of a moderator to get as many questions, comments, feedbacks, reactions, and so on. Wayne and I had a chance to visit with Cynthia about a couple of weeks ago just to talk a little bit about the video and also some of the things that went on behind the scenes. So I'm going to introduce Wayne.
Thank you much. Thank you all for coming out. Typically, we do a lot of conversation about how the movie was made and how Marcel was doing. But I want to make sure this is a conversation. Sometimes we can get stuck on the individual situation, but there are hundreds of Darcels in our community. And there's a systemic component to this that we have to raise up to about 3,000 feet as we think about this. And as we talk about it, how do we provide a system for these young people to escape the poverty that they're in? The book by Richard Rothstein, The Color of Law, talks about kind of how we got here through housing policy, through veterans benefits. The book Color of Money by Marsha Darren talks about credit and banking systems and how we got here. You look at what happened after Brown v. Board of Education and white flight, and what happened to neighborhoods that could not be refinanced or rebuilt or purchased. And you see when isolation happens when that occurs. And we need a community, we need social capital for these young people to make it to that next level. We need bridging capital across the community for us all to get there. So I'm not going to be on my soapbox because I'm usually here with the rest of the crew, so I can't go on without saying thank you to Clay Twill, the director. He had an awesome vision. Thank you to Jay Cole, who executive produced this movie. Thank you to Brian Johnston and Tim Grant and Stephen Klein, who produced this film. And over 10 years, watched young men grow up on camera. So without further ado, I won't take up any more time as far as speaking, and if there's any questions,
So any questions for you? Yes.
I'm wondering, where is this film distributed? Where is it shown? Who besides us sees it?
You know, that's a great question. This film was sold to the Stars Network. It is on every platform, iTunes, Google, YouTube, it's all there. And actually across the country, this film is doing great. It's number 5 on iTunes as far as sales. And it's playing right now on Stars if you have the Stars Network. But it is interesting that it's not much heard of here. So it's a good question.
You can also check it out at the Omaha Public Library.
That's right. Oh my goodness, we have a great public library. We were at the film festivals. So I'll better back up here. This film won at Doc NYC, the Audience Award, which is the highest award you can get at the New York Doc Festival, which at that time was the largest doc festival in the country. We've been to 5 other film festivals and we won across the country. So we've had a great couple of years. But during the Omaha Film Festival, the librarian, gosh, she's gonna kill me. We were in Omaha together. She said, we gotta get a copy of the call library. We made sure she got that free copy, so they ordered 4 more.
Yes, as the city council, the Douglas County Board, and the mayor, have they seen this film since it's about Omaha?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
My wife and I saw Racing in the Sun, and Cynthia pointed out Dark Sun. Could you give a little, like, what the rest of the story is? Because if I had seen this before I saw the play, I would have ran up and hugged the guy.
I'm so glad you asked. So I'm going to walk my way to that, where he is now. But the brothers opened up the South Shore. They found their freedom in small business. They found their freedom in entrepreneurism. And then they opened up a concrete business after the flooding. And so they made so much money doing the concrete business. That's their full-time gig. That's what they do. But as you can see, I want to plug on this, really, I want you to really focus in on this, how important art is. All through the documentary, you see him writing. You see him singing. And all the music in the documentary, the J. Cole music, those were the songs he had in his head the whole time. So art for him and art for us was important. And so usually that's the first thing that's cut in public schools. So art was the thing that really moved him forward. After it was over, Darcel, we're in New York, and people kept asking him, what are you going to do next? And we're like, oh, this is a great time to plug your construction company and all that good stuff and promote the business. And he's like, Wayne, I want to be an actor. An actor? Oh, you're killing me, man. But he kept working at it. And just recently, he was in the production of Raising in the Sun at the Omaha Playhouse. Did an excellent job. So, running his business. He seems to be a great father. We have daughters the same age, and man, we're in the running for who's the father of the year. I think it's Garcelle, so he's doing great. And I never want to forget about Darrell, because people sometimes forget about him. But if you notice his trajectory in the story, he wasn't the one you thought was going to make it, right? He said, you know, show me how to work this gun, but he was the one that became head manager of the Salvage store. He's really the business brain behind the company. He's got 2 kids now, he's married, and he's living a great life. They depend on each other. So make sure when you think back on it, or if you ever watch again, think about it from Darrell's perspective, and how big of a change he made, and how much support was needed along the way.
Well, I think it was interesting how the boys were able to make capital in Grand Island. And the dichotomy where it talks about Grand Island is 1/10 the size of Omaha, 2% black. And if you were to put that same situation, everybody where they would stay in Omaha, do we think they would have that same access for entrepreneurship to gain wealth? And I just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure, thanks, Kim. You know, if you were to ask Darrell, he would tell you no. He would tell you not just no, but I'm in church, so I'm not going to say what he would say. You know, access to capital was a big thing. It even kind of tripped on it in Grand Island. But what you have to remember, I talk about 6 square miles. They thought Omaha was only 6 square miles. They didn't see entrepreneurs that looked like them in their neighborhood. And also, think this is 10, 12 years ago, too. So we're talking about 10, 12 years ago. 2008, the Great Recession, think about where they were coming from. They couldn't see success from their house. They just didn't know what that looked like. So the opportunity to move to Grand Island and see something different, one, allowed them to kind of have that dream and that hope, but the access to capital. Funny story, we actually screened this film last week, and Garcelle recalled a story that just happened to them. So his brother and him have this company, and they said they always keep $20,000 to $30,000 in the bank. And so they want to do some expansion, do some larger projects. So they go to the bank, even in Grand Island, they said no. But they have a good friend, he's a white friend, who had no collateral, was able to walk into that same bank and get a loan. So although they're doing great, they're still trying to fight this fight. So right now they are 28 years old. So.
It's a great film, and thank you for being here. I also I just saw the film also last week at UNO, and Darcelle was there, and it was really awesome. But I think it's really important to point out also that when he was in Grand Island, he found refuge with other people of color. You know, the family that took him in, you know, it was the Hernandez family, I think he said. And so I think that was very interesting too, that he was able to be around, even though there was not a large black community there is a very large Latino community in Grand Island. And I think it's very interesting, certainly worth pointing out that that's where he found, they both found safe harbor.
Yeah, that black-brown coalition is real. A young man who was with him, his name is Ricky Calabero. He actually joined the Army, went Special Forces, and he's now in Italy right now. So he served his country. I just made rank a sergeant last month, so he's doing really well, and his mother is very proud of him. So, yeah, thanks for pointing that out.
Do you know, have any statistics, what are the numbers of young men and women in Omaha, you know, with them coming from broken homes like that, and what percentage of kids like that don't have that assistance?
Yeah, the numbers are real. So just a plug for the census. The census is coming up here in 2020, so make sure you get that in. The 2010 census really inspired this movement. If you look back at 2010, it really more 2008 when you think about it. So 75% of African American families in North Omaha are single family, right? But that's starting to be a regular thing across all demographics, so that's not a thing. In 2008, the graduation rate for African American kids was about 60%, 49% for African American males. The unemployment rate at that time was like 19.5% for North Omaha. And the violence was pretty remarkable. Slide up to today. A lot of philanthropists, a lot of community people, a lot of folks in this room have worked together to do early childhood education programs, do things at the middle school level, high school programs, college to career components. The city has really come a long way. So those same statistics today, for high school graduation rates for African Americans is almost close to even as far as the gap. It's about 78%, was 80% back in 2013. The unemployment rate for African Americans was the fastest dropping in the country besides, no problem, Savannah. And it also in South Carolina, it's now 6.7% for the zip codes that are North Omaha. The college going rate is now 25.7%, which is higher than national average for anyone, which is about 22% college graduation rates. The problem has evolved, but we had a lot of success in the summers due to the Step Up Summer Job Program and other collaborations through the city. The violence rate has actually dropped 85% in the summers due to the programming that happens in the city. But we have a long way to go. The programming doesn't hit everyone. There are people that, if you walked and asked them right now, they feel that kind of change, they'll tell you no. Being like Darcel, he would say, not just no, but again, I'm not going to say it. So we still have a long way to go, we've come a long way.
Wait, I was going to ask you a question before. Could this video be shown in high school or college, and also was the profanity issue for some folks?
So I have 3 kids. My oldest is 13. So I allow her to see it because I think she needs to know. At least for her dad, it was therapy. I think for her son, it's therapy. So we've shown it at the college level. We haven't shown it at high school yet. We have had requests, we just haven't really followed through with that. A lot of these showings and screenings are community-driven, like the one today. It's community-driven. I just heard about there's a showing this weekend that I've not even heard about where it's showing. So I'd be happy to show up anywhere that it's playing and work with some high school kids. I love working in the school, so I hope we can do that.
I saw about 2 hands on it just as I was asking the question. Yes.
Can you? Oh, there we go. Andrew Ellerman. I am a social worker and instructor at the school social work at UNO. I have about 23 students in the room today.
Oh, you know?
Yes. And so one of the things, first of all, thank you for coming and speaking, thank you for bringing this film. One of the challenges, I think, with having this conversation in community forums like this is there tends to be a lot of focus on the negative aspects of community, and sometimes I think we lose some of the richness of North Omaha, or there's a lot of history in North Omaha. I look around the room and see some different folks. I saw Pastor Cavett in here somewhere, and just Jamal, some people that have done a lot of work in the community. So I wonder how did those conversations also get brought into spaces like this whenever you have the opportunity to be at these conversations. But what does it look like to talk about richness in community and what the great stuff that's happening? Because we also talk a lot about implicit bias, and so I think sometimes we just feed implicit bias more. And so, yeah, I just wonder any thoughts around that.
Sure. That's an interesting conversation. You touched a little bit more on that in an earlier version of the film. We just kept running out of time because the politics internal. I'd love to have this conversation just in the community, right? So there's great stories. So if you look at the 24th and Glory book, it talks about all the richness and strength and power and talent that comes from North Omaha. I know my wife and I are just 2 people in the film, but she's a doctor, I'm a lawyer, both North Omaha. I know that probably hasn't come across the film, but you know, the most heated conversations I have aren't with white people. It's with middle-class black people who are saying, look, you're making us look bad. I'm going, but you know what? It's not about that. It's about young people that are having to walk this journey. So we can't take our eye off of that based on respectability. Not saying that's what you're saying, but it's important that we see each other in each other, that when you see Darcel, you also see me, a black attorney. You know, when you see Barbara, you see my wife. They grew up next door to each other, went to church together. You see a black doctor and a business owner. We have to be able to see each other. There has to be enough stories. So I would say that's a weakness in the amount of stories that get told versus in this story here. But you're right. Work on another project, so stay tuned. And we might tell the story about being a black face in the white space.
And there's a question all the way in the back there.
What is your hope from showing this film in this type of setting? What is your hope for the outcome of that?
I like the evaluation form done afterwards, for sure. That's a plug for that evaluation form.
You know, my hope for this film was never to be just a movie, so, you know, the producers would kill me, the financiers would kill me if I said I don't care how many people watch it. But I want this to be a movement. Not just a movie, but a movement. Because there's more than one Darcel out there. There's a whole community of folks who need systemic change. To go to that individualized question again, you know, all right, so how do we fund schools, right? How many school districts are in Douglas and Sarpent County? How many school districts are in Lincoln? Just one. That's just one. You know, if we talked about housing, we could talk about getting loans. We could take any part of the system. We could walk through, and I can tell you from Reconstruction, Jim Crow slavery, redlining, law enforcement policy with the drug war, and I can get you to a place that shows you why it looks like this. And I'm more concerned about a movement that's based on that than the individual story. So my hope for the movie is that it causes a conversation. And then we move not only from conversation, that we actually start looking at the privilege we have. I have privilege that I'm standing in this place on top of Native American land. I have male privilege that I can express and show. We all have a privilege. But it's up to us to, through social capital and bridging capital, to share that privilege with each other. And it's to pay attention to what's going on in our communities and to vote and to be a part of the system. And some of y'all need to run for office. So that's what I hope to do.
Thank you for plugging voting, by the way. This is kind of the year to do that. When we talk about just systematically, one of the biggest areas that we've had is kind of at the federal level. The '94 crime bill kind of ended up being a huge driver for it. Barack Obama had a great little counter to it with his My Brother's Keeper initiative, which was something that we would kind of hope would build off of that. Certainly here, I think Omaha was part of it. I don't know if it ever got far enough. I work on Chris Janicek's campaign. He's running for the U.S. Senate. For one, I definitely want to have a sit down with you, pick your brain, and see how we get with that. But what are some of the other programs that can really help show just systematically what the school to prison pipeline actually kind of is and how it touches not just poor communities, but specifically it really does seem to target Black communities, which is obviously problematic.
So you asked me the easy question, right? But anyway, I do want to hover on one thing real quick. So if you all remember the scene inside, which was a crack house. If you remember the scene there, you saw Black people, you saw white people, there were brown people in there. So these systems in the neighborhoods in which we all live affect everybody who lives in it, right? With the school to prison pipeline, you've got plenty of groups out there. You've got U-Turn that's out there that has both the in-school and out-of-school type of programming. You've got the work that's happening on Metro's campus with returning citizens. You got one of the, you have a house for LGBTQA++ initiatives. I mean, Omaha has a wealth of programming. We just have to find a way to collaborate and connect it all together so it becomes a system and not a program.
Hey, Wayne.
Hi. I shout you out. I'm sorry. That's my girl right there. So you go way back.
Thank you. I was curious, how was the documentary received outside of Omaha? Like, do people see it and they're like, wow, Black people are in Omaha? Or like, what? I know you guys won an award, but is this typical in Black communities outside of Omaha? I'm just curious of your experience.
You know, it's been really exciting to watch it grow. There's actually a candidate in Memphis who used it as a campaign platform and had the team out to come and talk about issues. Again, it's #5 on sales for iTunes, and we only had positive reviews from it. But I will tell you, in this community, if I go through the neighborhood, I walk through Spencer right now, they're like, "Wait, what's up, baby? How you doing?" But then I hear white people say, "Man, I saw your movie." So there are different reactions in different parts of this city, but nationwide, I mean, we've had lots of success. We travel the country. Probably I go every once a month. I'll be in Delaware next month. We'll be in New York again. So the rest of the world is seeing it.
I have a question. I work with some young people at South High School in a scholarship program where we help them with their essays. But one of the things I'm seeing is a lot of these young kids going to jail, and they've got a $2,000 bond, which would be $200. Do we have any way to borrow these people? I actually did this myself for a boy. And I will say this mother was very poor, but she gives me twice every month what I have. And so $200 isn't that much for me. Is there any programs where someone who was poor could go and get this bond money, get this child out of jail, get him back into school where he belongs? Because this boy was innocent. This is wrong. So wrong as far as that. I'd really like to see no bond for people or not, like California did. If they're really dangerous, yes, but if it's some minor offenses. And I think that's a big concern. A child should not be
Well, I can't sit here with Ozma and not give you the microphone for this question.
You know, one of the things that I found out was at a Big Mama's at an event, at Willie Hamilton's Black Men United. And what he said is that they're trying to work on, there's some people who have had some money with their folks for bond and so on. And technically, one of the issues we're seeing a number of organizations, there's a law they're trying to pass now that basically would say they would not have bail for people, particularly because of their income level. In other words, if you have income, you get to get out. And remember, our system, you're presumed innocent unless proven guilty. So that's one of the issues that we got to work on in Nebraska, because we've had to really get tough on crime and things. So we got to reverse that. I think as more and more communities come together and have these conversations, that's going to help propel or push that whole concept of why are people in there. And the other thing that hit me, and I think most people call that, is why are you locking someone up to get them to tell them something they definitely didn't involve themselves in? What is the repercussions when our law enforcement, our prosecutors do that? In other words, it was almost like we're saying, we're not going to let you out unless you tell on someone. But at the same time, and I know this happens, where sometimes if you tell on someone, you get in big trouble. Again, if you didn't commit the crime, you may have saw the crime or whatever. How do you address those issues? One of the things that I found out from attending 360 meetings and talking to different people is sometimes people don't cooperate because sometimes their anonymity is really not protected. And so those are the issues we need to talk about. Again, we're talking about juveniles here, okay? So we have to be very sensitive that the juvenile system is different than the adult system. And again, that's one of the reasons why we're dealing with this whole community conversation of how do we reform our system, because obviously it's broken. But really appreciate that question. Again, I think at some point, we will see the whole bill thing addressed more efficiently in Nebraska. But thank you for that question. And I saw another hand somewhere back here, a couple of hands.
Hey, I just want to know, like, I know we continue to talk about the notion of a system, and for me, the notion of a system, I can't stand it, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like as opposed to constantly talking about changing or, I don't know, adapting or doing things, how about breaking down the system? I'm so sick of this notion of system, and I feel like in part, that's kind of what helps cause a divide. You know, there's all these different structures and systems. So how can we go ahead and actually break these systems and stop looking into creating and modifying systems?
You know, that's a good question. I'm an attorney by training, and so as a lawyer, when I look at the system that was created, it's almost elegant. It's the way it's designed after de jure segregation. De jure segregation is by law. De facto segregation is in fact. The way after all of the work of the civil rights movement that it could realign itself legally. It's like a bowl of spaghetti. You pour one out, there's another one that kind of falls in its place. And so, as much as I like to throw the whole bowl of spaghetti out, we still gotta eat. So that means you have to do the real hard work of being technocrats. And really going in, knowing what you're doing, being strategic, being surgical, and making sure you hit those things you can hit in an area in which you can do it. And a great man once said that, you know, anything that you can do by yourself, that goal's not big enough. You're gonna need other people. And the other great wise African saying is that you can go fast by yourself, or you can go and get there slow in a group. Got that language up, you all are smart, right? You know what I'm saying? It's better to go together. You can go far together. So I know the frustration. I feel it every day, but we can't let that frustration make us burn down the system. We've seen that happen across the country through the riots of the 60s. Right? So we have to be very strategic about how we move forward. But I respect the question.
I know Paul has his hands up, but one of the things also, folks, and it goes back to being involved in the public policy conversations. And I love to tell the story that years ago, Senator Lauren Cruz said to me, Algernon, you'd be surprised at the number of people who don't write letters to state senators, who don't get involved, but they will talk with me in game. And he even also mentioned a local school district, I'm not going to mention the name or the initials today, but they were talking about appropriation and he was on that committee. So the point I'm sharing is that at some point we need to figure out how to get together, deconstruct systems, because as I've been working in City Hall or county, with the county administration, I've seen some stuff downtown in terms of the demographics and numbers of disproportionality of Latinos and African American. And I also have seen the hesitance of people to expose those numbers or talk about it. So the point I always like to raise is Omaha or Douglas County or Nebraska worse than other states? And when we look at some of our demographics, we're some in some very terrible situations. But I think we have the means to do that, looking at the amount of wealth and the social capital. So your question and your point is well taken. But at the end of the day, if our shoes are pinching and we refuse to pull them off and deal with them, then we have to deal with the circumstances. So again, we have to collectively come back, because sometimes systems and institutions that create the problem cannot necessarily fix the problem. So again, a good question, a good comment, and we have to again come together at some point, because I think it's just a matter of time to deal with some of the issues that were raised in the video. That's Paul, you have your hand up there back there.
Yeah, Wayne, the one person, I watched the movie the other night at UNO, and the one person that never gets mentioned is who?
It's who?
Who? Charles.
Yes.
Now that's
people stay away from that question.
That's a life that's been thrown away, and if you look at that, there's 8,000 people today in prison, and if you think things are improving, every one of those people, their children have a huge risk of being incarcerated. So just the impact in the community until that changes, and then if you could talk about that and then reparation issue.
Hey, thank you, Paul. I'll answer those backwards. So I'm a big fan of Ta-Nehisi Coates. A lot of times people talk about reparations back to slavery reparations, right? But here's the thing, that's so complicated. But you know what? I can take you back to 1940 with VA policy, right? So during the VA benefit component, where you got the VA bill, you could get a house, but you know who couldn't use the VA benefits? Black soldiers couldn't use it, right? And so they were shut out of Pennsylvania and Levittown and all these developments and all these developments that you see that move west. They couldn't find their way out, right? Let's do reparations for black veterans, right? Let's take farms. Farm policy has screwed over the black farmer. After slavery, the one thing we knew how to do was to put things in the ground and grow them. We weren't allowed to do that, right? And you can look at ag policy back from the 1930s to today that shows how the black family lost their farms. So let's do reparations for African American farmers, right? So, you know, I'm with you, but you have to make sure that it has a legal basis. And I think it ties to people who live here today. The politics of trying to get reparations for people who are no longer here, and it breaks my heart. It's politically untenable. But I think there are ways of doing it for people who are still living and breathing today to get those reparations based on things that have happened in the last 20 years. Take example of the crime bill. Take example of the difference between crack cocaine and regular cocaine. There's lots of places we could start. So I'm not bothered by the reparations conversation. It's just about when did you start it and can you tie it legally to the human beings who are living here today. So, back to Charles. Charles is a hard case. And even in the film, we touch it very lightly because we don't know if he did it or not. And we never want to put it out there that there are families here who are attached to those three gentlemen who killed. 2 people still died, right? So we have to be very sensitive about how we talk about that. So before the movie came out, we actually pulled the families of those 2 gentlemen together, and we watched the film with them. We let them cry, we let them yell, we let them curse us. But at the end of the day, they said, you know, it was honest, it was true. You know, I didn't take a side. So, so some of that is internal politics, why you haven't heard Charles mention. But really, for the most part, I don't know if he did it or not, to be honest with you.
Can I ask if there is I think everybody here tonight wants to fix the system, fix a lot of things. So besides voting, is there like an action step that every one of us can take in this room tomorrow and tell all of our, especially white family and friends, that we need the numbers to
Right.
make change?
There are a number of web pages you can go to. One is, I would say, Voices of Children, the Nebraska Appleseed Center, and they have the legislation that they're proposing, certain senators who are pushing this juvenile justice as well as criminal justice reform. Another bill that jumps out, and I found it fascinating, was Senator Chambers just recently introduced a bill after many years of having an African-American commission to help bring more African-American issues to state government. So that's another bill. But if you look on any of these web pages, the ACLU has some things. And the other thing I'm really clear to say to folks is don't just exclusively look at the Unicamera or Lincoln, because we have things going on in Douglas County as well as City Hall. And so sometimes you need to look at their web pages, call your city council person up. Sometimes they don't necessarily respond to letters. I know that because I write letters to them all the time. But whenever you get upset about, you see something in the paper, do something about it. Buy your steps, buy your roll, a sheet or whatever, and then write that letter or call them. But I think what I keep coming back to is, what did you do and when did you do something, particularly after watching this video? And one of the questions we have, or we have written in our evaluation on the back, were, what are you going to do about this? And again, it's up to you. And I think that's, again, the manifestation of this community is reflected on all of us as a collective situation. So again, maybe you hook up or talk to folks who are involved in public policy, and again, make sure that you stay connected, and then obviously come to our events that we do here, because we're always pushing the envelope and trying to deconstruct the elephant on the table. And I think that's what's wrong sometimes in our communities, that we don't take advantage of all the resources to push back and make our systems better.
Oh man, I was trying to give you an easy plug for the March 10th event. Oh, yeah. So the conversation continues March 10th. So we'll have Dr. Cynthia Robinson there. She's outstanding. The community will be there. We can all really talk about making this next step. It's a slow process. It takes a long time for us all to catch up to be in the same place. It's going to take even a longer time to dump out that spaghetti bowl. So.
Hi, my name is Ty Griffin. I am a student at UNO, business group major. I've worked with kids, I'm not that old, but I've worked with kids from babies up to high school. And so I know a lot of things we've been talking about is talking about policy change and advocacy and things like that. But what I feel that we need to do is to talk to these students. Like, we're doing all this action for the youth and, you know, trying to work the juvenile system and things like that, but how can we educate these youth on what we're trying to work for them for? They don't know, you know, they're living it every day, but they don't know anything about the judicial system. They don't know anything that's keeping them down. So I feel like we need to educate them first, showing them videos and movies like this, trying to put it in their head. So then they're like, okay, you know, I can make it out. Because in their vision, you know, how they're all, you know, they were in that vision like, man, I can't make it out of here. This is, I'm either going to be in the streets or I'm going to die. That's what these kids have nowadays. Instead of just saying, hey, you're going to make it one day, why don't we take the time to say, if you take this step and say, write one letter to a member of Congress saying, these are my issues, these are my problems, giving them the power, empowering those students to make a difference in themselves. I feel like it'll be easier for us to make a difference as older adults to make a difference. If we all work together with those youth, then it will be less of a problem.
I think I would grant that. That's what I would do. We have to do it that way. You know, one thing, while we're talking about young people who grow up in the neighborhood, I don't want to leave this room without talking about trauma. Both internal trauma and systemic trauma. There's a lot of counseling and coaching that we have to do before, you know, they can even think about tomorrow. There's research on scarcity. You know, it kind of shortens that window of how far you can come out and see. And so, you know, sometimes we get frustrated when we work with them, they're like, you know, but we have to do that deep work with them. It takes a long time. But once that agency takes over, they're unstoppable. So, you know, you look at Darcel and Darrell, they vote. They vote every time because criminal justice policy is real hard. So I think you're right. We gotta take it as a team, split up across, grab our group of young people, educate them, and then we can grow this system. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you so much for coming out and sharing with us. I'm just a little bit taken back when we deal with having the Douglas County DMC coordinated here, and also DMC, disproportionate minority contact number of black and brown kids that are in jail or that are in the system. But then now they're changing it to racial, ethnic disparity. And so we have to begin to deal with this. And I heard what you said, Jamal, to the fact that sometimes the system in itself can't heal itself. But that system within itself uses pressure points to talk to people and say that they're working on these things, but they never get worked on. And so I want to hold Douglas County accountable for what they are supposed to be doing and the number of kids that are in the juvenile system as well as in Douglas County Corrections, that we have to deal with this black and brown locking up. They are guilty no matter what. The lady asked for a $2,000 bond, that it only takes $200. I believe that we need to work on that issue. That's a simple issue. If the law is not going to be changed through Douglas County, then we've got to hold them accountable. They're the ones that set these bonds. And so if we want to start something tonight, that's what we need to do. We need to change the laws. If these kids can't get out of jail because they can't afford it, then it's up to the community to change the law and to hold Douglas County accountable for what they say they're doing for DMC and RED.
I really appreciate that, but one of the things that I'm also conscious of, folks, it got that way not overnight. And what I also found out is I was able to get the numbers about a year ago, and it's been hard to get the numbers again, because these numbers really are somewhat revealing about our system. We just had a site review from our National Office of Juvenile Justice grant manager, and one of the things that she pushed back and said to us is that she would like to have us serve more kids and demonstrate better outcomes considering the amount of money we're getting from the federal government. So I agree that we really have to change our system, but we're also getting pushback because sometimes when you start to expose the situation, you share the story, people sometimes feel a sense of that being told whatever. 2 quick points. One is we have a law that we're going to have mandatory training for police officers on diversity 2 hours once a year. Are you serious? You have to make a law to do that? So Senator Chambers is basically saying we want to give all kids or all people the same rights in a sense, because when you have 3 times the number of kids based on their population in the juvenile justice system, something is wrong. Latinos, African Americans. So we do have a problem in Douglas County, but I do agree 100%. We have to have people from outside push our system and make our system better, because at the end of the day, we're the taxpayers. And collectively, if we're not challenging ourselves and pushing back as a community, then the numbers of embarrassment that we see in these videos reflect that. And again, that was one thing I took away from these videos, how he had to sit there for 4 months or whatever, when he should not have been in there maybe for a day or 2, if that.
My question is, has there been any public screenings in West Omaha, and or what is the conversation sort of been like for you in West Omaha with your neighbors or with friends or for that part of the city?
You know, this is as far west as we actually have screened this film.
Tell him say this is far away.
I would never.
Hi, I'm Carmen. I'm new to Omaha. I've been here about 2 years. I was in Iowa for about 9 years before, but I grew up in California. And when I was moving from Des Moines to Omaha, one of the things that struck me is my white friends kept telling me to not live east of 72nd. And I was like, why? Oh, well, there's a lot of crime, and there's a Mexico and Omaha, and it's all one city, right? Like, you mentioned we're taxpayers and we need to be involved, but West Omaha is all part of the city too, right? It's not like they're split. So it was really interesting for me, having grown up in California, knowing Compton, knowing right, the bars on the windows, kind of, this is not, yeah, this is nothing. So the fact that this is the furthest west screening is concerning. You live in West Omaha?
You know, secret of the film, I actually live in North Omaha, but my wife didn't want the film crew to show the house.
Got it.
And she didn't want me to clean up. For over 10 years, they would come in on the house. So, so when she says you redeemed yourself because the house was clean when the camera showed up, so I actually live in North Omaha.
Okay. So I would love to go to West Omaha. I would love to, engage that conversation. But it seems that because those people live there, they're already trying to escape having those conversations, and they're not exactly complaining that all of our tax money is going to rejuvenate their side of the city. And that to me, I guess, seems really disconcerting, and I don't know how we can unify the community when an outsider is being told not to move east of 72nd.
That's a common story. It happened to me when I was in law school. I'm from North Omaha. They said, look, don't go across Cumming to do anything. So it's a common story, but so I'm hopeful. I'm always an optimist on this kind of thing. We're in a unique time. I think Nebraska has realized diversity and inclusion is key to its future. Blueprint Nebraska is research and findings. We've got the Chamber's 2040 initiative. If you look at what's going on in companies across the city, OPPD, for example, really robust diversity inclusion program. There was an article featured in Omaha Herald that talked about what the community is doing, but there's momentum. So we need to push while there's momentum, because during the program called Lead Diversity, which I'm a part of, we had some city council people there. And Ben Gray said, you know, it's all cute if it's a program, but I need for it to be a part of the DNA of the city. It can't be just a program, it's gotta move and live on. So I think that's the responsibility of us in this room, to make sure these programs become a part of how we actually do business. So the next person that goes to school here, who moves here to Omaha, I'll back up even further. My big dream is that Omaha becomes the best place in the country for people of color to live. I think we can do it.
We got time for one more question, Elijah.
To me, the movie was so well done, and so much love went into it, that the overall understanding of the system might not have been assumed. You have to be more brainwashed to perpetuate a system than to be a victim of it. Being a lawyer and noticing that really people don't want to talk about the system, what gives you the confidence, I may use confidence, that they see it as a benefit for them to alter it?
That's a great question. Goodness, we go way back as well. I think it's moved from black and brown to green. We're not going to survive as a city if we don't do it. We're not going to survive as a state if we don't do it, because I work for a program now that all of our 3.5 GPA and higher kids of color, they're not coming in here to go to school. And I don't know if I can convince them to stay. And partly, I don't know if I should, right? So I think at the end of the day, once you get past the flowery words, once you get past the emotion, I think as a bigger system, it's going to be money that drives this. We already lost ConAgra, right? I was in a conversation with Amazon. Not that they're the best jobs in the world. They said they couldn't move here because we just didn't have the employee base. There are zip codes where the unemployment rate is still double digits. So, unless we get serious about this and work with the young people that live in those zip codes and start doing some bridging capital and bringing the city back together again, we're going to lose it. So my hope is always based upon reality. That's the lawyer. So I'm hopeful, but I'm hopeful because I think we have to do it.
Folks, let's give Moina. A couple more closing comments. Number one, a shout out for when Preston Love is back there and he's doing Black Votes Matter. He also has some voter initiative, and he also has 24th Street Glory items in the back table, so I want to give Preston Love a shout out. I also know he's very much involved in that Southern tour with the church here, and so he's been doing that for a few years and very much engaged in that. So Preston, we appreciate that, but just want to throw that out at you. Folks, we cannot do this without the volunteers at the church, obviously PRI and other folks who've been involved in these issues. For those of you, this is your first time, we encourage you to come to this place of hospitality. As we say, our doors are open all the time to help people engage and deal with these issues, so we really appreciate you being out tonight. I want to make a quick plug to Tell Two Cities, March the 10th from 6:30 to 8:30 UNO Tuesday. And we're going to continue the conversation, but I also would like for those who will be there, who are here tonight, to come and maybe share what did you do since we last had this conversation. So the UNO Milo Bell Student Center, second floor, so we'd like to have you come out to that. We also have evaluations on the table. I'd like for you to complete those. And if you didn't sign in today, we'd like to have you sign in so we can have you on our mailing list, particularly our email list, as we do more of these events. If there's something that's going on in your neck of the woods or things that we need to bring the community together, feel free to reach out to any of us at First United Methodist Church or PRI, Policy Research and Innovation. We really appreciate you being here tonight. May the force be with you. neck of the woods.